Welcome, everyone, to another episode of If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
I'm Zack.
This is the Top 3 List Show. Give us a topic. We'll pick a top 3. We fight out for a final top 3. That's what we do here. This time, we're going back, way back. Some would say 15 years ago back. Some would say, I can't believe it's been 15 years. Like me.
Some would even say, 2006. That sounds like the most random year you can just pick out of a hat. But wouldn't you know it, looking back at the list that came out 15 years ago, I'll repeat, 15 years ago, yeah, you should feel old. Holy cannoli, there were some incredible albums that came out in that year.
Did you just say holy cannoli?
I did, because I didn't want to curse. I am a parent now. I feel like I have a slight responsibility. This is my life now. I just censor myself with desserts.
Oh, you.
I know.
Well, actually, you did try to perfect your dad jokes before you became a parent. So, all right.
I was born to be a dad. I want that on record, and I'm going to demand that you keep this in the episode. Is this a random conversation? Yes. Is 2006 still a very random year? Yes. But 15 years ago, some incredible albums, both from new emerging artists who would end up inspiring so many others, and then some returns from classic, legendary acts, released some really game-changing albums from themselves. So much so that I am forcing Matt to name his 3 favorite from that year. And I'm going to make you go first, Matt.
All right, you pushy little bitch.
Yeah. Oh, you can curse, huh? Well,
yes, I can.
Well, dang.
Yes, I can. All right. In no particular order, we're going to start out with a band that I guess you can say nobody was expecting them to put out new music because it's what they do. They really don't advertise much until it's about that time. And when the album came out, I remember that it was met with very kind of mixed reviews because it wasn't what you were expecting from Tool. It was really kind of, I want to say, more straight ahead for Tool than what we're used to from them. But 10,000 Days really takes Tool off the rails a little bit and brings them kind of into like the mainstream. And I'm not saying that in any bad way, because Tool, even on their worst day, is better than a lot of bands on the best day that they could really ever hope for. So on 10,000 Days, you have tracks like Vicarious, Zombie, The Pot, Right Into. There's so many really good songs on this album. And then there's also kind of the interlude tracks that they kind of always do that are very just different, like Wings for Marie and 10,000 Days, kind of like a tribute to Maynard's mom who passed away at the time. So it was a really great album from Tool. It might not be the best of what people consider Tool to have put out, but it's still a great album. And it was still, like we're doing here, one of the best of 2006. So that's number one.
All right, number one.
Number 2 is going to be, I can't even believe that we're starting to talk about this right now, because I've so very vividly remember when this came out, and every single track on this double album could have been released as a single.
I think I know which one you're talking about too.
And it's got so many of my favorite songs from this band. You know what it is already. It's Stadium Arcadium, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Oh my God. Danny California to lead off the double disc. Probably one of my favorite ones from the band. Snow, and then you've got Slow Cheetah. Strip My Mind. Let's talk about this song for a second.
Great song.
Such a killer song. And if you've never seen the movie The Fighter, with Mark Wahlberg, Christian Bale. That is an incredible movie. And what they use this song for in the movie, I'm not going to spoil it. It's almost like a training sequence, but this is such a slow song. It's kind of weird that they chose it, but it works so well. Second disc, if you want to go on the CD, or I think it's like the third side of the vinyl. Desecration, Smile, Tell Me Baby, Hard to Concentrate, Ready Made, Makes You Feel Better. Just so many great songs on this album. I mean, to put out this level of material, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that this was one of the times that John Frusciante rejoined the band. That this was
No.
It wasn't this one.
No, it wasn't this. It was actually his last album before he left for the second time.
That's right.
Which was
it was
what
one
made
of those bookends.
which was what made his departure kind of shocking, given that this was such a successful album. It came out a few years before he left the band for the second time, and this was the third album. Yeah, because it's Californication, which was the first album back, By the Way, and then Stadium Arcadium. And one real quick note too: most double albums, you can like pick which ones could have just been deleted and combined into one disc. This is one of the few double albums that like.
Yep.
There's only one song on the first disc that I would have cut out completely.
Which is
hump do. Like it was it's a
catchy funk tune. It's not the
compared
greatest,
to everything
but
else in that song. I mean, Charlie, when hearing them play Charlie live is so phenomenal, because there's just so you can just tell Frusciante is like having a ball in that song. And then Wet Sand is still such a beautiful song that gets me emotional just thinking about it. Like that first disc is just literally only one song to take off. And then the second disc, there's maybe one or two that is less memorable, but Desecration Smile. Oh, great.
It is such a killer double album. I would say this is probably one of, if not the best double album of all time.
I would agree with you. We can even do a whole Pick 3 episode about double albums, and this would definitely be on that list.
Yes, hands down. So yes, that is number 2. Number 3 was actually kind of what got me into this next band. So I remember kind of leaving college, like when I was at my college radio station, a lot of people started talking about like this genre called Nintendo rock, where it sounded like, you were in, believe me, I still don't get it because it's not a real thing, but it's just a very interesting genre of music. And this band put out, I think, one of their best albums to date. A lot of people are probably going to disagree with me on it, but on their, what was it, their fourth album? 4. On their fourth album, Muse released Black Holes and Revelations.
They're considered Nintendo. Well, first off, I never heard Nintendo rock.
That's what that's what people were calling it, and I don't agree. I don't agree with it, just because it's such a different sound, and it's.
I thought you were about to say Dragon Force 2. I'm like, okay, I can see where you're saying Nintendo, and I was going to be a little surprised. But no, I'm sorry, continue.
They're just straight up power metal. If you want to talk about
Guitar Hero,
Dragon Force, yeah. But no, the Muse released Black Holes and Revelations, and it's just a very different style of music. It's still great music. It's kind of, I want to say, and I've said this before, and this is the first time I'm ever going to say this on this podcast. This is, if Queen was doing music with Freddie Mercury in 2006, or even up to today, I could see them doing something kind of in this vein. If they still had that creative freedom, to do whatever they wanted to, instead of having to play like the classics and worry about recording and tainting the legacy of Queen. If they still had full creative freedom, everybody was still alive. This is what I can kind of picture them doing. But songs like Starlight, Supermassive Black Hole, Map of the Problematic, Knights of Sidonia is the biggest track off of here. That's kind of the track that everybody honed in on when they were talking about like Nintendo rock. And there was some bands that did very much so more Nintendo stuff, but they lumped this in there. Like I said before, I don't necessarily agree, but it's still just a great album. One of the best of the year. And I think one of Muse's most iconic albums before they actually did their next album in The Resistance, because that's the one that everybody kind of jumped on board with. But there you have it. My top 3: Tool's 10,000 Days, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Stadium Arcadium, and Muse, Black Holes and Revelation.
All right. Good top 3. Is mine better? Let's find out. Let's start off in no particular order, too. The first one, you might have heard me talk about this in a past episode of You Have to Pick 3, when we talked about concept albums. This album is what transformed My Chemical Romance into the emo punk starlets that everyone became in love with 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, and transformed them into the mega rock stars that they could have been. I say could have been because you could argue that they lost steam a little bit in the years following it. But the Black Parade literally took My Chemical Romance into a whole new level. The whole concept, the visuals, just the title track, it got people hooked. And it just, for an album like this to have gotten such enormous mainstream play is still pretty remarkable the more you think about it. It really was as if, kind of as Matt was talking about with Muse, of Queen, it was really as if Queen decided to do a punk rock opera in 2006. This is what I think it would have been. I mean, you got songs like Mama with Liza Minnelli, of all people, just singing on it. But even just Famous Last Words and House of Wolves, it's still an album that I listen back to and I'm like, oh my God, this is such a good rock album. So good that I'm even having my younger nephews and niece listen back to it and like, yeah, this is awesome. It's an album that I feel really old saying it's 15 years old, but it still sounds so good after so many years. And I think the fact that last year, before the world imploded, people got so excited for a My Chemical Romance reunion. And I think a big part of that is because of people just have a vivid memory of when they heard the Black Parade for the first time, or when they were just all over the world promoting it. So Black Parade from My Chemical Romance, my first pick.
Are you trying to justify how cool you might be by still listening to this?
No, but like that's the other thing though. You mentioned it, that My Chemical Romance and the Black Parade is still cool among young people, among high schoolers today. I mean, you could almost argue that My Chemical Romance is kind of the Guns N' Roses of when we were high schooler age.
Not that they were fired.
Not that they were that as dangerous as Guns N' Roses or as cool as Guns N' Roses, but kind of the similar cool. I don't know. Like
A, shots fired, and B, anything that is sold in Hot Topic is going to be popular amongst high schoolers.
First off, that's a very dated reference. As someone who used to work at Hot Topic, that's a very dated reference. But I digress. I'm moving on. Second album. In a past episode of If You Have to Pick Three, when we named the best debuts in music, I talked about the Killers' album Hot Fuzz, and acknowledging that, you know, it's really set the tone and really like was a unique album that came out. But I also mentioned that episode that I actually preferred their follow-up album, Sam's Town, which, yeah, it came out in 2006. I remember it took me a while to get into Hot Fuzz, but then I heard When You Were Young, the first single in support of Sam's Town. I'm like, all right, got a little bit more rock feel to it. It's less David Bowie and a little bit more Springsteen influence in it. And then just the rest of the album, like the title track is still such an incredible just opening to the album and sets the tone for what this record is. It made me actually into a Killers fan. And I would argue that this is the last great album that they released. I haven't really been a huge fan of what they've done since then, but at the time it was really refreshing to hear a group still sound a little modern and still have some synth influence in it, but to still sound like they were actually really passionate into their instruments without necessarily being heavy or in your face hard rock. It was pretty awesome to hear at the time. And I still think it's aged incredibly well. And I think Bones is just a fun, bouncy track. And it's one I still kind of find myself going, yeah, this was really fun. So The Killers, Sam's Town, my second pick.
I'm going to interject real quick because with Sam's Town, it's funny you mentioned this, that on Hot Fuss, yes, they did all the big production, but actually I learned this on a new show on Netflix called Song Exploder. They actually did the Killers when we were young.
Did they? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
They did. And it's very interesting to hear them talk about this because this album actually is based upon kind of like this hometown feel because they grew up in Vegas, and Sam's Town was actually, I think it was a bar where they all kind of frequented, and it just felt like home because that's where all the locals were, and that's, I think, where some of their parents worked because it was, you know, in Vegas and whatnot. But they talk about it being more of like a stripped back album, and, you know, in getting that feel from what you just mentioned, I feel like that's kind of like the perfect description to kind of give this album. It is that stripped back, more Springsteen hometown feel because it is their hometown album. It is all about their hometown. If you're interested more on that, go check out. It's called Song Exploder if you have Netflix.
I'm gonna have to check that out because that is interesting. I knew a little bit about like them being in Vegas and how it was influenced. I didn't know about the documentary. I have to check that out. So my third pick, I'm not gonna lie, because and I think after we share our three, I do want to give a lot of honorable mentions because there are so many good albums that came out this year. And this was a tough spot to fill. But I think I would be very, very, very wrong for not putting this in my third spot. And it's Amy Winehouse's Back to Black. You could argue that it's an album that kind of grew into popularity in the months to come, but I think that's also a testament to how great of an album it is that it got Grammys in 2008 even, it extended. But it really led the way to a lot more popular singers being able to be more soulful, into being more honest and again, going back to stripped back. I mean, at a time when Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera were doing the overproduced pop songs, here came a raw, almost vintage kind of sounding singer who didn't sound like she was singing any autotune. It would sound like she was singing from the heart, sounding real, just so soothing and so emotional at the same time. I mean, I still get chills hearing the title track, Back to Black. And then even a song like Rehab that's a little bit more fun is still being honest and still being raw and real. And it's just a raw, soothing kind of album that it's vintage sounding for sure. And I think it paved the way for the more vintage, raw bearing singers to come after her. I mean, I think Adele owes so much to someone like Amy Winehouse. So I think it was kind of mind blowing that album came out. Amy Winehouse is just one of those larger than life yet raw, like, and very similar to, like, if you think back to Janis Joplin or even Kurt Cobain, seemingly so large persona, but really you know that there was something more personal and hidden behind there. So yeah, it was hard to do this. My three favorite albums, I should say, or if I had to pick three of the best albums to come out in 2006, it would be My Chemical Romance's Black Parade, The Killers' Sam's Town, and Amy Winehouse's Back to Black. With that said, Matt, I don't know if you had the same trouble I had, but my goodness, I forgot how many good albums came out this year. Gnarls, Barkley's Saint Elsewhere. Talk about one of the biggest songs to come out of the 2000s decade. I mean, crazy. It was played everywhere, and it rightfully so. It's just a great song.
Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Who do you think you are?
And that wasn't even the best song off that album too. Like Smiley Face, I think is the best one, and it's a great album, and it really just showcased. I mean, CeeLo is a personality that he has some drama behind him, but it introduced Danger Mouse really to a larger audience too, and he's still one of the most incredible producers. I mean, that album was incredible. And then you had the Raconteurs, the Broken Boy Soldier. Finally, it wasn't just Jack. It's not just the guy from the White Stripes. It's like, no, this is Jack White, and this is another great band that he's a part of, and that was such a great debut.
Yep.
And I mean, you got Blood Mountain from Mastodon. You got Come Whatever May from Stone Sour. But I think you also have to, and you might be surprised I'm going to give this a shout out, but Future Sex Love Sounds from Justin Timberlake. That came out in 2006.
Well, you also have John Mayer's Continuum.
Oh, God, that came. But like
Wolf Mother put their debut album out in 2006.
But Justin Timberlake.
Justin Timberlake.
Screw Wolf Mother. I'm sorry. They were so overrated. Yeah, I said
You're overrated.
I am. Everyone agrees. No, but like going back real quick though to Future Sex Love Sounds. I mean, I think before that it was he released a solo album before, but he was still kind of the boy band guy. And like Future Sex, that really introduced him as a real solo entity. I mean, not just because of Sexy Back, but just as an album as a whole, him with Timberland. That was a huge album and still a jam too.
I didn't realize this too. I got another one. Rise Against put out The Sufferer and The Witness in 2006.
Yeah, 15 years old.
Where does the time go?
As Daylight Dies came out from Killswitch Engage.
There are a ton of albums.
I also think Educated Horses from Rob Zombie. That's a very underrated album. I mean, it was big at the time, but I don't think that gets remembered as fondly as people want to. I mean, that was his first album of John 5, who really brought a new energy to his music.
Is this really like the year of being stripped back? Because that was Rob Zombie's stripped back album.
Yeah. Well, for Rob Zombie, that was stripped back, yeah. I think it was also because it was the closest he got to a group sounding record ever. Like it gave such White Zombie vibes because of John 5. So yeah, stripped back. Also, I personally always loved Pink's album, I'm Not Dead. At that point, she, Misunderstood would slowly faded away from people's memories, but even the first single, Stupid Girl, didn't do so well on that album. But then You in Your Hand came out and it was like, oh, that's a funny song, but it was also really good and catchy. But then a song like Who Knew still makes me kind of teary-eyed. I mean, it's such a beautiful, honest song, and just kind of an example of how great Pink is. I always loved Pink. I am such a sucker for her.
I'm sorry. I thought you just said that you're such a slut girl for Pink.
No, it's not.
Wow.
The guy who wouldn't say crap on the podcast suddenly says slutty girl. No, no, I'm a sucker.
Okay.
Pink.
All right, I'll give one more and then we can move on from this slutty girl moment.
Yeah, and then I guess we should decide the final three. One more to make me feel old.
One more. The album that really got everybody into Breaking Benjamin and Phobia came out in 2006.
That came what?
The Diary of Jane, Breath, Evil Angel, Topless.
I officially feel old.
Dance with the Devil, all in 2006. Wow, the time goes by fast.
I feel like we need to come up with the final three before we get really, really depressed.
Yep.
Which leads me to the infamous Zack proposition.
You slutty girl.
Okay, so I think we can both agree that Stadium Arcadium definitely needs to be in the final three.
Yes.
Such a good album. I would really fight for the Black Parade to be in the final three.
Well, carry on with your bad self. Sure.
No, that Carry On?
Was that? Yeah.
Are you thinking of Fun?
No,
Carry On. Oh, are you just thinking of a different song?
No. At the end of the Black Parade.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Don't make me question myself.
When I hear Carry On, I just automatically think of hipster fun. But I digress. To the number 2 slot, again, no order, but number 2 slot would be Black Parade. And I would like to fight for Back to Black as well to be in the final three. Let me ask you this. If you had to pick one album from my list to bring over to the final three, because maybe I'm misreading the room here of to what you would prefer.
I think, as much as it pains me to say this, Amy Winehouse is what I would bring over.
Why does it pain you to say that?
Because I don't like Amy Winehouse.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Meanwhile, I love Amy Winehouse. But you are painfully agreeing to let me bring this over.
I know how big of an album that was.
It was huge. It was huge. Which is why I would also argue Black Parade. Also a huge album. I would argue that 10,000 Days, even you agreed it wasn't their best album.
Yep.
I love Muse, but you could argue that it wasn't really the album that broke them. Not that the album that broke them into the US was that great, The Resistance. Long story short, great album from Muse, Black Holes and Revelations. I would argue it should be Stadium Arcadium, Black Parade, and Amy Winehouse. Back to Black.
All right, fine. We'll go with that.
Is there an album that you would fight hard for that I didn't mention?
No, I can't argue with that.
Are you just so depressed that all these albums are making you feel old that you've lost all hope?
I just want to say no to Amy Winehouse, but that's just me.
Are you?
I never liked Amy Winehouse. There's just something that I could never get into her. And
was it the personality or the song or the music?
No, it was the music. It wasn't the personality.
Too vintage for you?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, if I had to pick between kind of this album and then in the same year, Christina Aguilera did Back to Basics, I would go with Christina Aguilera.
Oh, first off, whoa.
Yeah, whoa.
You choose that over Amy Winehouse. Second, that album came out in 2006 too?
Yep.
That had the Candyman song, right?
Yep.
Candyman. Ain't no other band. Not a bad album. Not a bad album. I'm not replacing any of the picks here, but not a bad album. Now I have Ain't No Other Man stuck in my head.
You slutty girl.
I feel like we're just going to have to rename this episode the Slutty Girl episode. So we agree that it should be Red Hot Chili Peppers, Stadium Arcadium, Amy Winehouse's Back to Black, and My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade. Boom! That's the final three best albums of 2006. The 3 albums that turned 15 this year and are making us legit feel old. But do you agree with our final list or our picks? Which albums that came out in 2006 are making you feel really old? Join us in our misery. Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. And remember that you can listen to our episodes on any platform you can imagine. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you join us for another episode really, really soon.
See ya.